So we're going to get started on some things. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to work on is editing those colors. There's different ways you can do things, but we're going to still stick with this photo. And let's say we want to change the color of their hats. Let me go ahead and trash this. So I just imported my photo, right? What's the very first thing that I need to do?
The copy.
There you
Copy
go.
the photo.
Always, always. Now that's not like a rule. That's my personal rule, and I'm telling you, you'll appreciate.
No, but it's good. It's a good
Yeah.
tip. Yeah.
Yeah. You just want to keep your original. Now you can always re-import your original. Make sure you don't save over it. That's fine. But when you're working, sometimes you just want to see your changes, and I'll show you that. Okay, so we're gonna want to change the color of these hats, right? So there's a couple ways to do it. But what I'm gonna show you a couple ways. Let's do the quick selection tool first. Now we can do this, and we can also use the magnetic lasso tool. Okay, but let's just try the quick selection tool. Let's see what that does. Okay, so the magnetic tool, let me just remind you, that's where you can just trace around, and it does give you pretty good lines. If you see how I'm off, it'll sort of get me back on track, but it's not that accurate, and it takes a little bit, right? So let's not do that. Oopsie. Get me off of here. Oh, it's not letting me click off. Okay, here we go. All right, so let me show you the other way. Let's do the quick selection tool and watch how this works. That was way easy because it's such a contrast, right? But I want to select her hat and his hat. But let's zoom in here and see if it's as perfect as we think. Okay, it's okay, but you see how this is here? Yeah. So there's a thing you can do. Once you click on this, you can press select. And then when you, there's a old way to do it. I like the old way, but there's also a new way to do it. If you press shift, select, and mask, what it does is isolate. I'm not sure why that, oh wait. Hold on a second. Let me just start fresh for a second. Because what I think is still picking up that old lasso tool. Okay, here we go. All right. Hopefully this will work. Oh no, it's not working. Okay, now let's start over. Okay. Quick selection tool. Here, here. Okay, now let's do select, shift, select and mask. I don't know why I was doing that. So now I want to get a nice clean line around here. So I'll do this, and it gives me a clean line around the object. Okay, and there is some I was missing down here, so let me try to pick that up as well. And you can always do contrast. You're just trying to select that area of the hat, you know, nothing more, nothing less. And this one did really, really well, but I'll just run my cursor over it. It's going to get a more natural line versus that hard line. Again, when you're editing, you don't want these hard lines. That's not how real life is. There's, especially in photos, there's a soft line. So you just take your cursor, go around like that. All right, so that's a pretty good outline of the hats, okay? Get this little bit. And you can always shift edge. Say you want more of the outside, you can do that. If you want less, you want to sort of go inside of your, what you just traced around, but we don't want that, but that's just an option. We want it right at 0. Contrast, say you really want a sharper line, you can increase the contrast, or you can decrease the contrast, which makes it a little bit softer. We'll keep it about here. You can feather your edges. Too much, obviously. You can feather your edges, which is good. Say I just wanted the inside part of their hat to be a different color. That's cool. We could do that. You get it. And smooth. Smooth is, that can be really good. Say, if you notice my edges here, let me shift my edges a little bit out. It just makes the edges here a little bit smoother. I mean, just sort of common sense. You can really, really increase it, but it just makes it a little bit smoother.
This tool is great for portrait, don't you? For
Yeah.
faces. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a great tool. It's like it can be used. I use it all the time. I'm just showing you guys things that most times when you go into Photoshop, you'll probably want to use. But yeah, you can use it for so many different things. But to select the object is a big deal because you just might want to change one piece of your photo. So once you figure out, play around with all the different options, you say, okay. So now you are Control 0, Command 0 on a Mac to get your whole picture. Now you have this selected, but I don't want to mess with my actual layer. So I just couldn't do Control C or Command C and Control V. So now the hats are isolated on that layer. So now we can play with color. If that layer is highlighted, you can do image adjustments. Hue and saturation is a great way to play with. There's literally so many ways, but I'm just going to show you. So it's, again, you're on the layer, image, adjustments, hue, and saturation. You can change this to any color that you want. Okay. Blue. Let's change it to definitely a different color. You can make it more saturated, which looks sort of fake. You can make it less saturated. You can do lighter, which is all the way to white. You can do darker, but then it's starting to look a little fake. You know, you don't want it to look fake. So let's change it to blue. Actually, let's change it to this pink. Purple, that shows up a little bit better. All right, so let's zoom in. A quick, if you want to press Z on your keyboard to get right to the zoom, you can. It doesn't look so bad, right? But we can make it look a little bit better. Now, if you want, you can try blending modes. You can do dissolve, darken. It starts to change it in a way. I don't really think we want to change it in that way because we don't really want to change the color. So we'll go back to normal. Let's try to change the opacity. If we can just blend it a little bit better. It's starting to look pretty good. Now let's see if we can also, so I changed the opacity here. Here's my layer. Here are some options for what I can do on my layer. I can change the opacity. I can go all the way down and take it away. I can just add it. Now I think I want to just soften it a little bit. Like I want to blend it a little bit. So I'll take my eraser and I'm going to really soften those edges up a lot. Let's see. Soften them up. Less hardness, more softness. But I also want to change the opacity. So again, I'm clicked on the eraser and here are options. And I just want to not make it so.
Changing the color.
Yeah. Because I'm blending that top with the bottom. But it's a little too hard for me. So I'm going to soften it up a little bit. Opacity a little bit higher. So I'm sort of making it like a faded way. You get it. There's so many things you can do, but you just, when you're doing something, you want to make it not look fake when you're changing something. So again, Control 0. So you sort of change the color of the hat where it doesn't look too bad. Like if you wouldn't know, you might not know. I mean, if you didn't know, you might not know that it was changed. Okay. Any questions about that? It's very simple.
No.
Okay. All right. So there's another thing that I saw that was really cool, and I want to just highlight this tool. Say I don't want this bird in the back, then if you take this tool, I think this is the one, healing brush tool. Oops. Huh. Maybe this is it. Okay, yeah. All right, so if you see how cool that was,
Yeah.
and we'll use this on our next thing. So I don't want that bird in there, sort of distracting to me. So on your healing brush tool, you literally just click over it and it just disappears and it blends with the background, which is just so cool. And say in a more detailed way, take that healing brush tool and see what it does even here. And you see it's not doing perfectly around the edges, but you can't tell that it was there. And that's why it's good to always do your 2 layers so you can see what you're working with. Okay. See the little changes. Now say, okay, I'm done. I'm happy with it. I removed his bracelet. I removed the bird. I changed the color of their hats, but the hats are still on a different layer. The hats are on a layer all their own, right? So I want to merge my layers. So I click on the 2 layers that I want merged. Now, once you merge them, it's done. Okay. There's 2 ways to put layers together. One is group. Let me show you that first. That's Control or Command G. Okay. So now that those 2 layers are in a folder under group. Okay. But they're still separate. I can still turn one off, you know, and keep the other. Now, the other way to do it is to highlight both layers and do Control or Command E. Now those layers are merged. That's one layer and I put it all together. So I lost any kind of changes. So if I wanted to just bring the bird back, it's possible because I have the original, but it would be challenging. But if you do it that way and it's merged, that means it's like glues it together and it won't come apart. So sometimes it's better to do groups if you feel like I might just want to change the bird, or I might want to bring them back, or I might want to have the bird without the hats to give yourself options, if that makes sense. So you can choose, but when you know you're done with something, it's good just to merge it and you can also right click and flatten image, same difference. So Control or Command E or flatten image, same difference. Now, well, that's not true. That's not true. Merge down or merge visible, but flatten image will flatten the entire thing. If you see what I did, when I right clicked on flatten image, it takes all my layers and goes like that. So I very, very rarely use flatten image because you lose all of your layers, all of your work. Okay. So it's not the wisest thing. And you can always export as a JPEG and that'll automatically flatten your image. But my suggestion is when you're creating something that needs to be a flat image, have your Photoshop file with all of its layers, but then export it and make a JPEG, but save it as. Don't save it over because you always want to keep your Photoshop. Anytime, like say the client's like, I don't like the pink hats, I want blue. Well, if you flatten your entire image, you can't go in and just change those hats. And you can't go, I mean, you can do it, but you would have to start over. And then if you merge the layers, again, I can't get to the hats without tracing them again, doing the color and everything. So it's better to group it. And that way, if it's grouped, you can get in there and just change the hats, if that makes sense. So use your layers, use your groups, very, very, don't use your glutes. Just kidding. Use your groups, but very, very rarely flatten. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that's that first one about color. And let me show you a different way. It's 1 o'clock now. All right. So here are these hats. So we saw the hue and saturation. There's also something called selective color. where, let me see if this will do it for me. Let's try it here. Image adjustments, selective color. Okay, so now I'm on the layer of them, not their hats, but of them. And say on, okay, in the background where it has those nice blues, like say I want to increase the blue in the magenta, and it's such a slight, okay, here, you can sort of see it. You can create the entire image. You can affect the blacks. Oh, this is the reds, that's why. Up here, you can change the colors. Say, for example, the cyan in the picture, all the blues. I want to make that a little bit more intense. You can barely tell the difference, but you might work on this one, a different one. But it basically takes all of your cyan, all of your colors in there and works on those colors. Say I want my whites extra bright. I'll do this a lot. So let's just focus on the white in her shirt. So I'm on white, this is selective color, whites. And on the whites, I don't want any, I want it to be as bright as possible. So I took out a lot of that. For example, I can add back magenta, yellow, cyan, and black in the whites. So it's almost a way to like, this isn't a really great picture to be honest, but sometimes it's such an obvious difference. Like if you have a picture that's overly red or somebody's skin tone is really, really red, you can focus on that color and you can adjust the colors that way. Okay, and we'll get into that. But yeah, that'll be the end of this one. Any questions on that about the color, simple color change?
No, on my part.